3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
From Philadelphia to Los Angeles
And everywhere in between.
filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio.
It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
Welcome back, Nittany No Huddle Nation. Today's podcast, we are going to be covering the Penn State at Auburn game preview. And we're going to go in depth or break down, as typical, our quarterback room, wide receivers, running backs, all the offensive line, defensive line, secondary, and special teams. And we already put our pick'ems out for this week, so we'll just do our predictions for the game. But we're going to go right into it, starting with our quarterbacks versus their quarterbacks. I will say right off the bat, I think we have a huge advantage in the quarterback room against Auburn. Auburn does have similarities to us with fan bases calling for a different quarterback to be starting than the one that is starting. So we'll start off right away with Auburn. TJ Finley is their named starter, but Robbie Ashford has also been playing snaps. So Zach, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what you see from Auburn's passing game and what you think about our passing game as well.
Yeah, so you named it. TJ Finley is the starting quarterback, although he split some time with Ashford. Finley has 34 attempts to Ashford's 10. Ashford, from the film that I've seen, is actually a pretty competent runner. He's only got 13 carries, but 129 yards. So when he's in there, Penn State's going to have to be
That
sure
includes
of
sacks, right?
Right. I mean, he's not dropping back to pass a lot, so there may not be too many sacks, but I think he's definitely a guy that Auburn will have some packages ready to go. So if you're Penn State, you see him come in, you just got to be, if it's a blitz package, you got to be sure you get home and you don't let him sneak out, because he's a guy that can hurt you. I think whether you're talking Finley or Ashford, they've got a combined completion percentage of 61%, which isn't bad. That's about right where Clifford's at, but they've got 1 touchdown to 4 interceptions through 2 games against Mercer and San Jose State. So that's concerning. And if you followed the Auburn fan base or any of their sites or blogs, they're not thrilled with the quarterback situation. Something that's interesting to me, and I haven't followed it too closely, so if there's any Auburn folks listening, please correct me in the comments. But interesting for me, Zach Calzada is the 3rd string quarterback, and he may not be fully healthy yet, but some of you might remember him from being the Texas A&M quarterback last year that upset Bama. And when I saw that he was transferring to Auburn, knowing how the Bo Nix, TJ Finley position battle played out last year, I was thinking that's their guy, right? They're bringing him in to start. And then to find out he's not even really in the 2-man rotation is really interesting. But I think this is clearly the type of game, whether it's Finley or Ashford, don't let them beat you with your feet. Don't get beat over the top. Make them consistently beat you in the passing game and make them march down the field. Because again, 4 interceptions in 2 games against really bad competition or not great competition is kind of telling to me. So that's my takeaway is don't, number 1, when Ashford's in the game, know what we're doing. And number 2, don't get beat deep, because I don't think these guys can march the ball consistently through the air if for instance, Penn State gets a lead.
Yeah, and I think just to touch on that, our secondary, I think, is set up to not get beat deep. We have not been beat deep on a play yet, really. I think our longest play against us like 30 yards, so 30, 40 yards, which is great. Like that's what you want to see. Let's keep everything in front of us. I know we may, get on our secondary a little bit for playing off the ball and letting guys catch the ball underneath, but against this Auburn team, that might be the play. Just keep it in front. Let's get it done on 3rd down and go from there. As far as Penn State's quarterback room, I know we've talked in depth about the Aller Clifford situation. What do you think about Clifford and him starting this game? And how do you think he's going to, fare on the road? He's played a lot of road games in tough environments. We'll talk about Auburn's home field advantage as well here. I don't see Clifford really struggling from what I saw with Auburn's secondary. I think Clifford could have a very good game, and quite frankly, he needs to, separate himself from Aller. So I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, Zach, or I can turn it over to Devin to give his thoughts as well.
I think Clifford's the guy. And I just wanted to very briefly say, and I'm going to kick it over to Coach Devin, 28 of 32 for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was Sean Clifford last year versus Auburn. Probably the high watermark of the Clifford era. He had, many of you might recall, he had a really good game against Auburn last year. The pass blocking was really good. So obviously it could be a different story going south and playing in the humidity and in a hostile environment. But again, I think there's no reason to suspect that he's not going to have another good game. But I do think you probably see Aller, even if Clifford doesn't get hurt. I'm thinking there's probably going to be a series or two where he gets in there.
Yeah, I concur. So let's see what Coach Devin has to say about that.
Yeah, so to hit on Auburn quickly, I think it was really interesting. They were listed as co-starters last week, and Finley on today's depth chart for Auburn was listed as the starter. I honestly would not be surprised if Ashford doesn't play nearly as much as he has the first 2 weeks. Even though I don't think Finley's a great quarterback, I think that they're going to try to pick one and stick with them. Zach really hit on this a little bit, but turnovers is a huge issue for Auburn through 2 games. They haven't forced a turnover, which we can talk about when we get to defense, and they've given up 4 interceptions and fumbled 4 times. They haven't lost any of those fumbles, but still, you drop 4, odds say you're going to lose one eventually. So turnovers is a big concern for them. I also think it's really interesting that none of the 3 quarterbacks on Auburn's, or the 3 primary quarterbacks on Auburn's roster, started at Auburn. All 3 are transfers. Just kind of a weird little nugget there. That Finley came from LSU. Ashford, as we talked about, was basically traded for Bo Nix. And then the Texas A&M guy that, like Zach said, he has to still be injured, or I think he would be more in the battle. One thing I'm going to reference a lot is an article that I read on Alabama.com by their beat writer, their Auburn writer, Tom Green. And he graded all the positions just like we kind of do after post games usually. And he gave the quarterbacks a B- against San Jose State, which kind of blew my mind. It seemed like a homer call there, which I'll reference all their ratings.
Ironically, the same grade we gave Clifford after Purdue.
Yeah. So I for everything that I've read, they seem very low on the quarterbacks, but Tom Green from Alabama seems like a B- is pretty solid for a very lackluster performance.
Maybe he's at practice though.
That's true. He probably is. To go to Penn State, Zach hit on it. Clifford's probably his best statistical game was last year against Auburn. And I think Auburn's secondary is worse this year, which we'll get into a lot later on. I hope Sean Clifford has a day. I really do. I think he can come out and really have a game to remember, to go to Jordan Hare and to hit on some routes. I don't want to talk too much about Auburn's secondary right now, but there are a lot of holes that we can exploit based on the personnel that we succeed in. So I think Sean Clifford could have a really memorable day. Like Zach said, I fully expect to see Drew Aller at some point. Maybe it's one series, maybe it's one play, but I expect to see him at some point. But I think Clifford's going to have a day.
Yeah, I really, based on the matchups, I think we are poised to have a better quarterback play and day than Auburn. So I think we kind of agree with that. And I think most, even Auburn homers would say, as much, crap that gets talked about Clifford, at least they have a named starter they're committed to. So, that there is something to say with, giving a guy a starting job and sticking with him, So I think we did enough talk about quarterbacks for today until next week, depending on how this game goes, be talking about the quarterbacks some more. So we'll transfer right into the offensive line. I'm going to be honest. I watched the San Jose Auburn game and I saw San Jose State pushing that Auburn offensive line around. And I know in the deep comment sections of the Auburn blogs and as well as their podcasts and YouTube pages, they think their offensive line is very suspect at this point. So I think from the offensive line standpoint, I know we have been complaining about our offensive line, and we did give up a lot of pressures and sacks this weekend to Ohio. But if you look at those stats and the breakdown, Ohio did have a very big offensive line in terms of their physicality and their experience as well. So Zach, I don't know if you want to talk about the offensive line a little bit and what you think about our offensive line versus their offensive line.
Yeah. So one thing I'll note, and I think we kind of touched on this with Ohio a little bit, is I look at their offensive line and I see a lot of experience. I'm not sure if they're guys that have been starting for a long time or if I know a couple of them are transfers, but left tackle is a redshirt senior, left guard is a graduate senior, center is a junior, right guard and right tackle are both redshirt seniors. So you're talking older guys with some level of experience, even if it's not a lot of necessarily starting experience. But I think it was a little concerning too, watching some of the San Jose State. If you're an Auburn fan, for me, the stats can sometimes be misleading. And Auburn has ran for 495 yards through 2 games, which surface level, that sounds pretty good. That's almost 250 yards a game. They have 79 carries, so they've definitely been committed to running the ball. That's 40 carries a game basically. But I saw a stat where Tank Bigsby, who has 29 carries for 198 yards, so he's basically averaging 15 for 100, has rushed for negative yards on a third of his plays. So it's really been boomer bust. And a lot of that, again, you think is, we referenced it a little bit with Singleton versus Ohio, where sometimes you just out athlete the other guy. You're just better. And I think you definitely probably have a lot of that with Tank Bigsby versus a Mercer and even a San Jose State. So it's one of those things where maybe on the surface, it seems like the running game's great, but maybe it should be better because frankly, I think Auburn has a great backfield. I think Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter, we saw him last year in the Penn State game, another, I think, supremely talented kid. And then they run Ashford a lot too. Like I said, 13 carries for 129 yards. So that's basically 7 carries a game for what amounts to the backup quarterback. So I think if you're Auburn, there's a lot to like there, but until you see that run game against the defense that can push back a little bit, and maybe Penn State ends up not being that defense. We think we're going to be solid, obviously, but it'll be interesting to see because I don't think we really know, despite those what I would say is inflated stats. I don't think we really know where the Auburn run game is at yet, although I think we know that they have a couple really good running backs.
Yeah, and that can, Devin, if you have anything to add on offensive line, you can add that in a moment here, but we'll also talk about the running backs as well here, just kind of blend into that. I mean, Tank Bigsby, he's a great running back, and I would be remiss to say I think I could see him playing in the NFL. Like, he looks like that kind of back. I think his offensive line is just not very good. And like you said, he has a lot of boomer bust plays. Now, granted, they haven't really played anybody great, but I think he's that every down back. So, and then having a second good running back as well in Jarquez Hunter, they could definitely do some damage. So I think our linebackers, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, are gonna, have a day, trying to stop that run, which will be very important, forcing them to pass. So back to the offensive line. Devin, you have anything to add on the offensive line side?
Yeah, I tried to look up a lot of offensive line stuff so that we seemed prepared for our 55 subscribers.
Climb with us.
The left tackle, Killian Zerer. I don't know how to say his name, but Killian, that's a classic name. Huge, 6'7", 312. He started the last 3 games of last year as a junior. Wasn't a starter before that. Some people thought he was going to get beat out in camp. He ended up winning the job. It seems like he's probably their most up in the air position there at left tackle. Their left guard is Brandon Council. He's the graduate that Zach mentioned. He started last year and the year before that. He's in his 3rd year starting, has a lot of experience. Then center is a really interesting position for them now going into week 3. They had Nick Brahms, who was a all SEC type player last year. I think he was 2nd team. I just wrote down all SEC, but I think he was 2nd team and got hurt and retired from football on August 29th. So like 2 weeks ago, decided he wasn't going to play this season. And so they're starting a kid, Tate Johnson, who's a junior, 6'4", 285 at center as just like what are we going to do? Because this guy's gone, who is really solid, the Nick Brahms kid.
Do you have any stats on their false starts or anything as well?
Yes, I do.
Centers.
I don't know specific players, but last week against San Jose State, they allowed 1 sack, they had 3 false starts, and they had 1 holding penalty. at home. Those 3 false starts is really interesting to me at home.
That might be a
obviously-
center quarterback
Right.
issue is what I'm
right. I didn't get to
learn to. I did watch the tape. I just couldn't remember how many false starts. I didn't write it down. So
yeah, I didn't watch every snap of the game, so I don't know exactly. I just wrote down that they had 3 false starts. Tom Green, again, going to reference his article because he's an Alabama guy. Auburn, he knows his stuff, I'm assuming. He gave them a B because they averaged 5.5 rush yards per game, or per 5.5 yards per rush against San Jose State. And to go into the running backs, like you were just saying, Tank Bigsby, man, I'm really struggling. Tank Bigsby is a really good running back. I think he's pretty legit. Jordan and I were at the Penn State Auburn game last year, and we just kept saying, why are they not giving Tank Bigsby the ball?
That guy, the rock.
He had 23 carries for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns, and it felt like every time he touched it, he was going to gain 5 to 7 yards. So it felt like that in the stands, and they didn't use him enough. And there was some controversy in the first half last week at San Jose State where they were losing 10-7 at halftime, and neither running back was getting the carries that most people thought they should get. So then in the second half, they rushed 13 times for 108 yards, which is pretty good average for those just in the second half. I think that they will really try to run the ball against Penn State and hope that this offensive line that is 6'7", 6'7", 6'5", 6'4", 6'4" can try to dominate. Like you said, I think they're suspect, but I mean, it's an SEC offensive line. I think they're going to be okay. And Bigsby is pretty legit in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really going to come down to, I think our defensive line versus their offensive line could be kind of a wash. So yeah. I think it's going to come down to, can those younger, I should say, linebackers really fill those gaps and stop that run? Because if we can force them to throw, as much crap as I've had on our secondary, I think that's the game plan we would want to have. I'd rather see them throw at our DBs than just run us up and down the field, because getting run on like that, I know you guys are going to remember, some of those games against Wisconsin in the past. Those games where we just get run out of the stadium, they hurt a little more for me. And I don't know why. I think just
Illinois last year.
Yeah, just being dominated at the line of scrimmage, just takes all the gust out of you, and it just feels like a worse loss than, getting beat over the top. So that's what I'll say on that. Zach, do you have anything you wanted to add to that? If not, we'll move on to the wide receiver room.
No, I think you're all over it. I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit more when we're looking at the defensive side of the ball, but I'm definitely, despite what we're hearing is perhaps some less than stellar offensive line play from Auburn, I have some concerns about a run defense because we haven't seen anyone really try to run on us yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. We played pass happy Purdue and kind of pass happy Ohio. So it'll be a good test, and hopefully, we're up to the cause. But, when you have a running back like Tank Bigsby in that backfield, it could be a long day for us. That could be a big turning point for Auburn as well.
One other thing, just super quick before we leave here, since we hit quarterbacks and running backs, Auburn is one of only 36 teams in the nation right now who, through 2 games, is perfect in the red zone, which will be pretty important for us to try to stop them. They're 8 for 8. All 8 were touchdowns.
I was going to say, are they 2 for 2?
Yeah, they're 8 for 8. They have the most of anybody perfect red zones. Just something to keep in mind, that when they get in the red zone, they've scored. Obviously, they've played nobody and nobody junior, but we'll see how they do against Penn State.
Yeah. Our red zone defense has looked pretty all right. So
yeah,
bend but don't suck. That's our motto on defense. Moving on, we'll hit the wide receiver room. I think our wide receivers are due for a big game, and I think we're going to see. I know that Franklin has been talking depth rotation, beating that horse, but I think it's on the road at Auburn. We are going to see our top 3 receivers really go at their secondary, and we're going to see them get the majority of the snaps. So I think Tinsley had a good game last week. Didn't really get to see him as much as I probably would have liked, but they were rotating people through, which I'm fine. Save them for the big games. But I think he is that dude at wide receiver, and I'm very excited to see how he does in a big, night game in the SEC. He's playing for that NFL contract, I feel like right now. So I'm very excited to see him go. And then Parker Washington, I know he kind of took a shot last week. Looked like he came back and was fine, but just something to kind of note. I think with his speed and from what I saw from Auburn, their lack of speed at secondary, that could be a big mismatch too. So, Zach, do you want to talk about our wide receiver room, and then kind of talk about Auburn's wide receivers as well? I don't really have many stats on their wide receiver room pulled up.
I do.
Neither do they.
Yeah, I was gonna say they really looked terrible. Like I could not tell you who their number one wide receiver was last week because it felt like they were not getting separation at all. So that's my takeaway. I'll let you take over from there.
I think the passing game has certainly not been great, and we kind of touched on that a little bit with the quarterback stats. So it's a little bit difficult to evaluate the receiver room. I think obviously it's the SEC. They're going to have some speed. They're going to have talent out there. Javarius Johnson is their leading receiver at this point with 7 receptions for 158 yards. The thing that stands out to me there is 22.6 per catch. He's got a long of 56. So look for Johnson to maybe be the guy that busts things out over the top. I'm going to be watching John Samuel Schenker. Great Southern tight end name. He had a good game against Penn State last year, caught 5 or 6 passes. I remember him being one of Bo Nix's primary targets, just a guy that he was always looking to, sure-handed, dependable. He has the only touchdown reception on the team, but again, he only has 5 catches for 64 yards. Shedrick Jackson, a guy who played up in State College last year, 5 catches. Tank Bigsby, 5 catches out of the backfield. Look for him, to get involved in the passing game as well. But it's really hard to evaluate when their passing game has just struggled. So if you're Penn State, and again, we talked about this with the Purdue game. If you're Penn State, you think you've got a legit secondary, you've got a team with a questionable passing offense, you have to lock it down. I mean, it's just such a golden opportunity that I think if they have a good game through the air, you're going to be really disappointed with the Penn State secondary.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well, looking at the tape when I watched it. I just don't see their wide receivers getting separation on our secondary. I think we're going to keep everybody in front of us. I will say my biggest concern is our tackling. We are still missing a lot of tackles, and against I will say better receivers. I don't know how they really match up against Purdue's wide receivers, but we missed a lot of tackles in that Purdue game. And that could come back to haunt us both in the running game side as well as the receiver side. So Devin, you have any, you have the stats for us?
Yeah, Zach hit most of them there. Tom Green gave them a C against San Jose State. He said the receivers were the biggest letdown of anybody. Bigsby led them last week with 4 catches. He was their leading receiver. And today in Brian Harsin, the head coach at Auburn, his press conference, he said, quote, "We have to have more production from our wide receivers." So that's obviously a point of emphasis for them as well.
So maybe they are going to come out passing.
Right. And I would say to Zach's point about Javarius Johnson, yes, he's their leading receiver right now, but Malcolm Johnson, so another Johnson, he is their top projected receiver of the year and hasn't played yet due to injury, but he will play on Saturday. Sounds like he was full pads, everything at practice today, but he has no catches yet this year, hasn't played. So number 16 and number 6, both last name Johnson, 2 guys to really watch
names?
out. Malcolm and Javarius. Or Javarius.
Malcolm Johnson, Jarius Johnson? Javarius Johnson, Jimmy Johnson, doesn't matter, state by 14.
Yeah, there you go. But I would I'd keep an eye on him playing, throwing to Bigsby out of the backfield. Zach mentioned John Samuel Schenker. I think he's a key guy to watch. He had a key 4th down catch for Auburn to keep their drive alive on that, what ended up being the game-winning drive against San Jose State. They had 4th and medium, and he ended up catching a key pass that was a route specifically designed for him. So I'd keep an eye on him, trying to get more involved as the game goes on.
Yeah,
I think our receivers dominate. I didn't really talk about ours because I'm going to save it for the secondary. Auburn secondary is trash. I think our receivers could have a great game.
Here was my notes for Auburn secondary. Trash.
The people listening on Spotify and Apple podcasts don't know what you did.
I just crumpled up a piece of paper of something that was on the ground. I think it was actually kind of important, so I should probably pick that up. But
Threw it in the film room.
yeah. The janitor will get it. It's cool. Zach, you got anything else to add on the secondary?
No,
The wide receivers.
And so Devin kind of hit on it. I think when we get that Auburn secondary, everything we've seen, and we'll see what Tom Green has to say, but everything I've read and seen is that their secondary perhaps is ripe for the taking as far as Penn State goes. And again, I go back to the data points are just, small at this point. Auburn's only thrown 44 passes. So to me, it's kind of hard to evaluate the receiving core at that point. They only have 8 guys who have even caught a pass. I think there's only 5 that have caught more than like 2 passes. Whereas you look at Penn State
Saturday.
And we had 17 guys catch a pass and a lot of guys with multiple catches. So probably not a great position group, but again, they're playing in the SEC. There's going to be speed and athleticism. So to Jordan's point, just make sure the tackling is sound, because I don't think they have a lot of game changers. But if the tackling is not sound, these guys are going to be able to. They're going to be able to run. They're going to be able to break tackles.
Yeah, they're still really good football players, and. To your point, Auburn has recruited very well. So, those guys, just because they're not playing at Alabama, LSU, Georgia, doesn't mean they're not good enough to play Division I football. This is going to be a game, I think. So I'll wrap up our offensive side of the ball. Let's just go through and give who we think has the advantage at each position. So we'll start with the quarterback room. Like, I think we can all say we have the advantage in the quarterback room. So offensive line, I'm kind of torn because after watching Ohio, I'm really kind of suspect on our offensive line as well. So I think that's going to be a push. I really don't think either team has a great offensive line. I really don't see much difference between those two. So,
yeah, I'd probably say Auburn has a slight advantage, but like a 55-45 advantage, pretty tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's probably like a push, but just playing at home, Auburn, I really expect them. Contrary to what Harsin may have said, I really think their game plan is going to be, we're going to run. We're going to come out, we're going to run. Penn State has played 2 sort of softer type passing offenses. And I think it's unclear yet whether we can what we're going to look like against the run. So if for nothing else other than playing at home in a huge game, huge environment, and what I think is going to be a run heavy game plan, I'll give the slight edge to Auburn.
Okay. Moving on to wide receiver room, without a doubt, I think we can all agree we have the better wide receivers. We have 3 very solid wide receivers. Hopefully we don't have any drops this week, which I think we did a really good job of sharing that up this last weekend. So moving forward, I think we can all agree wide receiver advantage goes to Penn State. Moving on, running backs. This is interesting. My gut tells me that I think, honestly, Auburn has the more seasoned running back room. They've proven they can, Bigsby is a good running back. He is a very good running back. Do we have a lot of young talent? Yes, but what can they do against the very good, bigger offensive or defensive lines of the SEC? So I think I may get some flack for this, especially with how Singleton played last week, but I think I'm giving the running back advantage to Auburn.
Yeah, I would definitely give Auburn. They just have more experience. I think Tank Bigsby is legit. I really do.
Yeah, I kind of hope to see him in the NFL.
I actually think that may be as good a 1-2 punch as Penn State will actually see coming out of the backfield. Obviously, Travion Henderson at Ohio State, and I'm sure they got 5-star backups all over the place. But I think these guys are both really good. And if you go back and watch the Penn State Auburn game last year, Bo Nix, they didn't really do a whole lot through the air. Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter just carried them, and they both look really good.
Yeah, and for reference, Devin and I sat next to a bunch of Auburn fans actually last year, and they were
good people.
Yeah, they were very polite, Southern polite, I would say. Not obnoxious. They cheered for their team. We cheered for ours. May have poked the bear a little bit on them when we were winning there. So, but they were melting down. They could not believe. They were like, why are we not running? Why are we not running? We're averaging 5 yards plus a carry and we're not running the ball. And we were like, yeah, I don't care what's happening, just keep it going. So just kind of interesting to get the perspective. And it was actually kind of cool sitting next to opposing fans in Beaver Stadium, hearing their thoughts. And as much as they didn't want to admit, they were very shocked at how loud Beaver Stadium was. And they were kind of like, we're SEC, Auburn's home field. Jordan Hare is loud, but they were even like, it's nothing like this in the South. Like, we have not seen something like this before. So they were like kind of trying to not be impressed by it, but even to their best abilities of hiding their feelings, you could tell that they were like, okay, this is a legit home field. So,
I mean, those two guys combined for, I have the stats up from last year. They combined for 31 carries for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty solid.
And we had a much.
I think we had a better run defense than we probably are going to have this year.
Yeah. So that's all I got. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back out. We'll go through the defense, defensive line, linebackers, secondary, and then we'll cover special teams real quick and give our final thoughts on the game and our full game prediction. So we'll take that quick break. We'll see you in a few. Welcome back from commercial break. We're going to head right back into it, starting with the defensive line. I think this is a really interesting matchup. We're going to see our defensive line versus their offensive line. I know we went in depth on their offensive line. I'm a bit nervous here with our defensive line. We did a good job against Ohio. A lot of pressures. We got to the quarterback some, but I just don't see us being able to dominate like that this week against Auburn. I know you guys are going to have the stats and everything, but just from a feel standpoint, watching both teams, I think that we're going to see a lot more out of PJ Mustipher this weekend that we haven't seen yet. I feel like they've been kind of holding back on him a little bit, letting him get his legs, for all intents and purposes, underneath him again. And I'm really hoping he has a standout game because we really need him to be that leader on the defensive line. Zach, what do you have for us on the D line?
Yeah, I think we and we talked about Mustipher a little bit after the Purdue game, where just probably not a great game for him to really be heavily involved because they're so pass happy. This is one where I think, you want to hear PJ Mustipher's name called a lot. You want to hear him getting in the backfield. Hakeem Beamon, another guy that's maybe, to my mind, a little undersized for like a prototypical Big Ten defensive tackle. But I think this is a game where he can use that. The fact that he's a little undersized, but probably a little bit quicker, a little bit more agile than your typical offensive lineman. Those two guys have to really hold the line as far as the run game. And it'll be, with the quarterback play that they have, it's imperative that we get pressure, because I don't think these guys are horrible, right? They're Division I quarterbacks. So if you're not getting pressure on them, there's a chance they can have a good game and hurt us through the air. But I think if we can get pressure with the type of secondary that we have and the ball hawks that we have, it all starts with the defensive line and on the pressure side, specifically the ends. And so I'm excited to see our defensive line. I think this is a game where they can really shine. But at the same time, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm kind of scared of their run game, even though we went through it earlier with some of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde stats. I think they've got some guys in the backfield. And so it'll be fun to watch the defensive line one way or the other. I think that's going to be very telling as far as the outcome of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to say that right before you got there, that I think with most games too, in those trenches is where you win and lose. And, not to change the subject, but we saw it with Alabama and Texas this weekend. You win those matchups with your offensive line versus their defensive line and vice versa. That's going to be the difference in the game, getting to that quarterback, making those pressured plays. And with Auburn's lack of, for better terms, a solidified, standout starting quarterback, I think getting pressure to them, forcing those bad plays. We already know they're very prone to turnovers. And Devin, maybe you can talk about that too. You were talking about the fumbles. I don't know who all made those fumbles, if those were quarterbacks or running backs, but I think that could be a huge play. And having our defensive line being able to force some tackles and our linebackers come in and maybe get those turnovers from fumbles, that would be very, very imperative, I think. So Devin, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead and talk about your thoughts on both defensive lines.
Sure. So I think you guys pretty much covered the Penn State offensive or defensive line. Like Zach and you both said, uh, Auburn's probably going to come and run, even though Harsin said in his press conference about the receivers needing to play better. I think the best chance that Auburn has to win is to ride Tank Bigsby into the sunset. So our defensive line is going to have to play well and get pressure in the backfield and make tackles on Bigsby and Jerquez Hunter. As far as Auburn's defensive line, this was the only category that Tom Green, again from Alabama.com, this is the only category he gave an A in. He gave their defensive line against San Jose State an A because they recorded a pair of sacks, 5 tackles for loss, had 5 QB hurries, and held San Jose State to just 54 rush yards. Sure, it's San Jose State, so I don't know how much stock to put in that. They have this. I think the key person to watch on the defensive line for Auburn is this kid Jason Jones. He's a sophomore. He's part of the Bo Nix trade. He came from Oregon. Came off the bench for Oregon last year, and now he's starting for Auburn. I think he's a name to watch. I think he's going to really clog thing up. He's a big tackle. When Penn State tries to run it, he's going to be involved. And then they have a rush end, Derek Hall, who had a really good game against San Jose State. I think he had 7 or 8 tackles and one of those sacks. He's a guy to watch. He won their team MVP of the week last week. All those teams obviously give out MVPs every week. You know how that goes. And he won their defensive one. He's a good player. I think I saw him projected right now to be an early second round draft pick come next April. I think his stock is rising and has a chance to rise this season. So that's a name to watch. Number 29 is Derek Hall, the kid to watch.
Yeah, that's a good highlight there. That's why we got you as our stat guy on here to, bring those kind of important.
I just read articles from Alabama.com. That's all I do.
Somebody has to. So that's all good stuff with the defensive line. If you guys want, we can just give our, advantage, disadvantage right now. I think we're going to have an advantage at the defensive line position. And I really think that, like I said earlier, that PJ Mustipher has to show up big this week. And I think he will. I know he had a great game last year against Auburn. I mean, that's what it felt like to me. I don't really remember the nitty gritty of his stats and stuff. And maybe Zach, you can talk on that, but it felt like his presence was felt everywhere. So I'm going to give the advantage to Penn State for that. Zach, do you have something you want to say?
I think I'm probably going to call it a draw just because, again, I think this type of game leads itself to something that I don't think we've seen yet from Penn State's defense in terms of a team that just wants to line up and really, really run the ball and maybe throw in a lot of play action. But I don't know that we've seen enough yet from that standpoint for me to feel confident saying we've got the edge, because I think they've got a pretty good defensive line. The other thing worth noting is it looks to me like they play a lot of 3-4, and a lot of times today it's kind of tough to tell with teams are always moving people around and a lot of stand-up guys on the edge. Are they DNs or are they linebackers? But they've clearly got the nose tackle, Jason Jones, who's going to play in the middle and try to clog things up. So just a different look. I don't think in the Big Ten you see a lot of that sort of base 3-4 defense. So does that create some problems for Penn State? Perhaps we'll see. But I think the defensive line is a strength of Auburn. So I'm going to say it's a push.
And I'll complete the trifecta because I think Auburn has a slight advantage there. So each one of us hit one category. Like I mentioned and like Zach said, I think Auburn has some players and he hit this. Their scheme is mainly a 3-4, and they run a lot of 2-4-5 nickel package type things with an extra secondary guy out there and only 2 down linemen. But I think that they're going to get pressure. I think because I don't think our offensive line is good enough to not give up pressure all night. So can Auburn take advantage of that and force a turnover, since they haven't done that yet this year? They haven't forced a single turnover. Is this a game that the defensive line can force Clifford into a bad pass or get a strip sack or strip one of these freshman running backs? I think it could definitely happen. So I'd give Auburn a slight advantage.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And maybe in our post game, we can go a little more in depth. I feel like this Auburn post game is probably going to be one of our longer longer ones. So maybe we can go in depth and see where we were right, where we were wrong, kind of go from there. So moving on, we're going to talk about, which I've been kind of itching to talk about, our linebackers versus their linebackers. This is a big game for our linebacking core. And I think we can all agree last week's game, our linebackers looked very confident and they played a lot better than obviously the Purdue game. And some of that has to do with that targeting call from the Purdue game, kind of getting rotation players in there. But Zach, I'll let you hit it off. What do you think about our linebackers? And then on the flip side, we can talk about the linebackers, which did not look very good at all for Auburn this last week.
So I'll start by saying Abdul Carter obviously got the ejection at Purdue. It was nice to see him back out there against Ohio. True freshman, really raw. I think he's got a lot of talent. He's got obviously the size and speed. You're gonna have to learn how to play Division I linebacker as a true freshman, but I think he's got a chance as the season goes on. And you've got some question marks elsewhere outside of Curtis Jacobs. I think he's a guy that you're going to start to see maybe kind of find that role as a guy that can really help this defense despite being a true freshman. Again, Jacobs, I've been saying it every week. I feel like Jacobs is the guy that's got to be the star of the defense. And this is the type of game where I'd love to see him just take over. And a lot of the comments that we made with the defensive line, I'll echo that for linebacker. I'll just say as a front seven as a whole, that run defense, I don't think we've been tested yet. Kobe King, Tyler Elsdon at middle linebacker. This is something they haven't seen yet, right? Purdue, this is a whole different animal from Purdue or Ohio. So I have some concerns, as I've said over and over so far, that there's a chance Auburn's going to be able to run on us. So as far as our linebackers go, it's a big challenge. It's a big opportunity to see who we've got and who can step up to the plate. Auburn's linebacking core, I'll note that Cam Riley leads the team with 20 tackles, which is almost double what anybody else on the team has. Owen Papo has 11. Again, that 3-4, it's hard to tell, defensive end, outside linebacker. Through 2 games against some pretty inferior opposition, they only have 4 sacks. So I don't disagree with Devin. I think with our offensive line play, there's always a chance that quarterback pressure on Clifford or Aller is going to be a problem. But this is one where I'm going to watch that, because I think a team that only has 4 sacks through 2 games against Mercer and San Jose State, I would hope and expect they're not getting too much pressure on us. But again, it's always a possibility.
Right. And speaking of question marks, what's the over-under for minutes before the announcers mention Abdul Carter wearing number 11 this week? I feel like that's been like
0.
Every time he's on the field, it's like he's wearing number 11 as a true freshman. Clearly in camp, they've seen something. The last person to wear 11 is Micah Parsons, and he's in the NFL now. It's just like, we get it. Like he has potential, but I just wanted to say that it's been really grinding my gears.
To maybe switch gears really quickly, just in terms of the recruiting, he's one. You've got Singleton, you've got Katron Allen, you've got Drew Aller, you've got a lot of stars in this recruiting class, but 2 of the other freshmen that have seen a lot of the field, Abdul Carter on defense, not a super highly rated guy relative to some of those studs I just named. And then Omari Evans, who in the Purdue game, when Penn State only played 5 receivers, he was the number 5 receiver. And another guy that if you look at the stars listing of the 2022 class, almost all the way at the bottom. So, that's one where you got to tip your cap to Franklin or the lead recruiter, whoever it was, to find some guys that are maybe sort of the diamond in the rough. And I don't know, Abdul Carter to me looks like he should have been like a 5-star just in terms of body size and athleticism. And I think he's one in a couple of years, once they really get him trained how to play linebacker at this level, I think he's going to be a star.
He's one of those NCAA 14 4-star gems that we look for. So shout out to anybody still playing NCAA 14. So Devin, I'll turn it over to you. What do you got for us? Hit us with some good cold hard facts.
Yeah, Penn State wise, I think Zach covered a lot. Obviously, Curtis Jacobs, I think, is going to be huge. He's going to have to play really well. Another freshman, not a true freshman, but a redshirt freshman, Dominic DeLuca. I thought he played really well. He played extended minutes, obviously, against Ohio, more so than he did against Purdue. But I thought he played really well and looked the part, and I think he could find his way working up the depth chart a little bit. And then Tyler Elsdon is another name we've mentioned on here a few times. he played a lot more against Ohio than I think I expected him to, just because he is a starter. But he finished the game with 6 tackles and he has 9 through 2 games. So he's another Penn Stater that I think is going to have a big game. As far as Auburn, Zach hit that their leading tackler is Cam Riley, 21 tackles in 2 games. He had 16 tackles against Mercer. Don't really know I didn't watch that game. I don't know if either of you went back. I'm not going to watch an Auburn versus Mercer game. Sorry.
I tried, but
televised.
We don't have ESPN, the Ocho in our basic package. So
yeah, that was a tough one to find. But so I don't know. 16 tackles makes me think that he played a lot of the game in a 30-point blowout of Mercer. And if he had 16 tackles in one half or a little over a half, then that's pretty stinking impressive. But I don't think he's their best linebacker. I think he just had a really great game. I would say that a couple guys to look for is the Owen Papo. I'm not sure if I said that right. Papo. He had a big game against San Jose State. He's involved in a lot. He had a big game against them, and I think he'll be the key guy. He wears number 0, which I always like, number 0. And then their other linebacker is Eku Leota. I remember him playing last year a little bit in the Penn State game. He has 7 tackles and 2 sacks already this year. So out of those 4 sacks that you were mentioning, Zach, he has 2 of them. So he's a name to watch, bringing a little bit of pressure from the linebacking section.
Yeah, all good stuff there. Let's move forward here and get to what everybody's going to want to talk about, our secondary versus their secondary. I have been very critical of our secondary, but I had really no complaints with this last weekend. I know a lot of our starters really didn't play that much. We got a lot of rotation. Porter Jr., he was largely not on the field, which I'm fine with. We don't need to flex on Ohio University. Let's get some depth there. But overall, I am excited because I think this could be a huge standout game for our secondary. So I'll let you guys talk about Auburn's secondary. I mean, the way they played last week, they kind of look like Ohio's secondary. So that's what I'll say on that. And we'll move forward. Zach, what do you think about the secondary battles?
Yeah, I think if you're Penn State, and I kind of hit on this, so I'll try not to belabor it, but this is one where we referenced the front 7 really needing to lock down the run. This is a game where, based on stats, based on what we saw of Auburn last year, you feel like if we have the secondary we think we have, let those guys lock those receivers down and really focus on the run. Dial up some blitz packages again, make the quarterback, feel that pressure, because he's obviously they've not gotten it done through the air against 2 clearly lesser teams. Again, there's the ability of the quarterback run to be concerned about, but I think it's one where if you trust this secondary, like I think that they do, it allows you defensively to do a number of different things that I think can really help Penn State. And so again, it'll be another opportunity for our secondary to really show up. And I will note, I just saw from looking at the stats, Auburn has 9 passes defended on the season, which is slightly less than Joey Porter had in the first half alone against Purdue. It's a joke, but some people may be offended or upset, but no, I think again, that's one area where I feel really good, and it's scary to say, and maybe it'll come back to haunt me, but I really feel like our secondary is going to have a good game and going to lock down Auburn through the air, which will open up a lot of different things that Manny Diaz can do to try to probably contain what is the stronger part of Auburn's offense and maybe gloss over some of the weaknesses that we have on defense.
Yeah, and when it comes to our secondary, one thing I wanted to note, and Devin, maybe you can have the stats up for this, or you might know them offhand. Have we had an interception yet? Because I know we've had about, 7 or 8 that probably should have been picked off. So that makes me a little nervous, especially with our safeties. I would like to see them kind of ball hawking and maybe, get some of those takeaways, because I think we definitely should have had a few already. So Zach,
and Keaton Ellis and Jair Brown have been all over a number of Porter has been all over a number of passes. So I'm a big law of averages guy. So maybe the fact that we dropped a number of would-be interceptions the first 2 games is going to help us against Auburn, but the opportunities are going to be there because we're going to put they're going to be in position to make some interceptions. It's just we got to start catching them.
Yeah. Devin, what do you got for us on the stat side?
Yeah, I think Zach covered everything. Penn State defensively, secondary. I would love to see us go a lot of man coverage one-on-one on the secondary against their receivers, because I think we can handle it. And like Zach said, that allows us to do other things to prevent the running game, which I think is Auburn's strongest part. So I don't really have anything to add to Penn State's secondary. I think that we have a great chance of really dominating there. For Auburn, however, I think Auburn's secondary is far and away the worst part of their defense. I don't think it's even close.
I think their comment sections probably agree with you there.
Yeah, it looks really bad. San Jose passed for 275 yards against them, completed almost 62% of their passes. It's not.
That was in Jordan Hare.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Hare is the toughest place to play according to Auburn fans. But San Jose State should have won that game, really. One thing I saw and that Tom Green noted in his article was that the secondary allowed 7 passes that covered at least 15 yards, and 5 of those went for at least 20 yards. So that I think there's going to be chances down the field. He also pointed out, and you see this if you go back and watch that game at all, is that quick throws over the middle, which is something that Penn State likes to do a lot of. It was wide open, and Auburn really struggled with defending the quick passes across the middle. So I really think that Tinsley is that guy. Send him across the middle. He looks fearless. He's not afraid to take a hit, and he's going to catch some passes and have space to operate.
Yeah, that's one thing. I think we forgot to cover the tight ends today.
Oh, we kind of mentioned them, but a little bit.
Are we going to see Theo out there today or this week?
I haven't seen anything that says that he would be cleared. So
okay,
not sure.
Back to the secondary issues.
Yeah, but back to just one last thing here. Tom Green gave them a C and said, quote, Brian Harsin has to want more out of this defense or out of these defensive backs. So as much as I think that Mr. Green was a little off in some of his ratings, I think that the DBs, I think he pretty much summed that up where I would agree with that. And it all goes back to what we said about Sean Clifford earlier. I think this is a chance for Clifford and the receivers to have a game. Obviously, this podcast is well known for saying how much we want to run the ball, but if we don't run the ball, I think we will be successful. So if we only have 20, 25 carries, I get it, because I think that we will have so much success through the air that if you got a 35-year-old quarterback, you got to trust him.
There it is.
All the shots.
Anything to say? Zach, got anything for us?
No, I think Devin, the last thing Devin said was really on point. And when we get to our predictions, I think that's what I'm going to speak to is from an offensive strategy standpoint. I'm going to kind of switch gears from what we've been saying the last couple of weeks, which is interesting, but it gets back to one of my biggest philosophies in sports coaching is every game's different and you got to be versatile. You got to be able to take what the defense is either giving you or take what you think the defense is weak at. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but I think Devin was all over it.
All right, real quick, let's just hit our special teams. I'm hoping we don't see a lot of our punter this week, but if we do, I think we have a very good advantage at the punting position. Place kick holding or place kicking, I should say. I'm with Devin on this one. I do not see a lot of confidence there. I know I texted you guys during the game that, I felt like our kicking game is going to be a problem. And I know a lot of Penn State fans have been blowing us up in the comments saying our kicker is going to cost us a game at some point if he continues to kick like he did this last weekend. So I'll let you guys take over the special teams conversation. Zach, go ahead.
So I'm a huge fan of Auburn's kicker. We saw he had a really good game last year against Penn State, nailed a couple of long kicks. His older brother is actually the kicker for the Las Vegas Raiders. So, I said it in our instant reaction and our 3 and out. I'm not as down on the kicking game, perhaps as my 2 colleagues here, but I am a little concerned. And I think if it turns into a kicking contest or if it goes to overtime, that's definitely something to watch when kicking becomes so important. That'll be a little scary because
overtime.
Less important as it used to be.
Well, it's true, but the kicking game, whether it's overtime, whether it's end of regulation. I think clearly Auburn has an advantage, although as we've said every week now, I really like our punter. And I think in a huge road game like this, that's really crucial. If the offense comes out and is a little stagnant, just knowing the punter is going to really get the job done and hopefully pin the defense back helps out. So maybe it comes out in the wash between the kicking and the punting, but road game, big and hostile environment, the special teams has to be good. I mean, that's how you win these types of games. You see it all the time. Crucial special teams letdowns cost you games like this.
Texas, they missed a field goal right at the end of the first quarter, I believe. That's the game right there. Devin, go ahead, hit us with what you're thinking about the.
Yeah, I'm super concerned about Pinniger. I mean, if you watch the recap that we filmed earlier with our pick'ems, I'm super concerned about it. But like we always say, we're not at practice, so there's obviously a reason that he's the starting kicker. So I'm going to have to find a way to trust him. I know a lot of kickers, as weird as that sounds. Like I know people who have kicked at the high school and into the college level. So I feel like it's not that hard if you just do it. You know what I mean? Like obviously it's very hard, but I'm just saying. Like I couldn't do it. I fully admit that. And Jake Pinniger, please don't challenge me because I don't want to get embarrassed. But we'll film it for the podcast.
I think
the other thing about
the field goal, to be honest,
I couldn't make a 5-yard field goal. The other thing, Zach, you might know this because I know you like their kicker. Did I read that he tore his ACL last season or in the off season? I read something about coming back from ACL surgery, but I don't know if
I'm
maybe.
not sure.
Okay, maybe we'll look that up, or if someone knows, add it to the comments. And then the last thing before we get cut off here, Auburn's only punted 4 times. His average is terrible, but he's had 2 punts inside the 20, so that's probably why his average is so terrible. But only 4 punts in 2 games. So yeah.
So welcome back. We had to take a quick commercial break. We did get a phone call in, and somebody brought up that we were correct. Devin was correct. I'll let you talk it, Devin, about the ACL tear to the place kick holder for Auburn.
Yeah, so the kicker for Auburn, Anders Carlson, like Zach said, had a really good season last year. And in November against Mississippi State, he tore his left ACL. He was just cleared. The article posted to another Alabama website was posted August 23rd. So he was cleared right before the season to be able to play. He said he's a good 100%, but wears this big bulky brace on his left leg. So it's pretty impressive that he's 9 for 9 on PATs and made a 45-yard field goal whenever. I mean, that's a less than a year turnaround on an ACL tear is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And shout out to that random caller, Johnny, for, bringing up what we were talking about. So moving on, let's do our final game predictions here. Actually, take a step back. Let's do our advantage, disadvantage for I think we still have to do the linebackers and the secondary as well as special teams. So I'll start it off. We'll do linebackers first. I think we have an advantage at the linebacker position. I think you guys can all agree with that. I hear no complaints. So
I'm going to say it's a push. I'm still worried about our linebackers. I just feel like we haven't.
I think we got to get rid of this push thing personally.
Okay. All right. Well, then
Make
I'm going
a decision.
Gun to your head. Who are you picking?
I'm going Auburn.
Oh man, that's even worse. I vote to bring the tie back. All right. I mean, go ahead and say what you wanted to say about the linebackers real quick.
I just think I want to see a game where they're tested, and I don't think we really saw Purdue the style of that game. We were, in the fourth quarter, we had like 7 defensive backs on the field. So I just don't think we really got a true test of a normal 4-3 front 7 against a team that wants to run the ball. I just don't think we've seen that yet. And Auburn might have some trouble too at the linebacker position, but I'm not sold. I'm worried that that's going to be a lingering problem for us. So I would be happy to be proved wrong though.
Okay. Well, let us know in the comments if you think Zach's wrong about our linebackers. I'm sure you guys will, because you find everything that we are wrong about, apparently. All right, moving on. We'll cover the secondary. I think this is unanimous. Auburn secondary is better, right? I'm just kidding. I think our secondary, as much crap as I've talked on it, I think they get it done this weekend. I think that's kind of our unanimous decision. So I was actually very, very pleased with how we played against Ohio. So maybe I am wrong. And as one commenter said, I need to find a new way to evaluate DBs. So there's
Yeah,
there's a nugget of information for you. So between that and my top 10, I've got a little laundry list of homework to do apparently. So moving on, special teams. I think I'm going to give the advantage to Auburn here. I know our punting may be better, but I think it could come down to field goal making and extra point making specifically. So that gives me a little concern. You shouldn't be missing extra points ever, really, in my opinion. But even worse, you shouldn't be missing them against low pressure teams. So what do you guys think?
So is the push dead? I can't do that anymore? Because I really think
you can push it. We'll allow it.
The punting favors Penn State. The kicking definitely favors Auburn. If either team is able to bust a return, that's obviously a huge play. That'll be something to watch for. But
I think Bigsby is actually their returner too.
So that's concerning. I mean, it's like I said earlier. I think if you're Penn State, you can't lose the game on special teams. You go down there, play solid special teams operationally, good punting, make the extra points, make the short field goals, don't give up any long returns.
I will say under James Franklin, as much crap as I give Franklin, we have been a very disciplined and good special teams team. I mean, you look back, now granted having NFL talent for our kick returns has definitely helped.
Well, we have two punters in the NFL.
Yeah, exactly.
And
a field goal kicker. So yeah, we definitely have had some talent in the special teams department, but that's part of recruiting. So, people want to talk about these big name programs, but getting big name kickers, that's part of it. So Devin, you got something for us?
Yeah, I was just trying to very quickly pull up who has returned kicks for Auburn. So I would say, kind of like Zach said, I would actually give us a slight special teams advantage. I would give them the kicking advantage by a lot. I would give us the punting advantage by a lot. And I actually think our returns are a little better. Looking at Auburn's stats, it's actually not Bigsby returning, but it's Hunter. So that's probably where you just got them backwards.
Yeah.
But Hunter is their primary kick returner. Their punt returner is I believe a defensive back, Keontae Scott. He has 4 punt returns for 56 yards. But again, I mean, they played Mercer and San Jose State. So Parker Washington almost had a 50-yard return there, that one. So,
well, and
I think our returners are a little better.
Probably 50 yards side
to side. So, yeah, I'll give us slight advantage.
Okay. So moving on, let's do our full game prediction. I think that.
Are you going first? I thought you wanted to go reverse order.
No, that was just for top 10.
Oh, okay.
I'm back to leading the ship here. So I think we're going to come out. We're going to take care of business, but it's going to be a closer game, and it's going to come down to getting a defensive stop towards the end of the game, because I do think that Auburn may get down a score or two late and be looking to come back and kind of abandon that run game. So I'm going to go 28-20.
So the exact same score as last year.
Exactly. That's my prediction.
I guess I'll jump in. So I'm gonna go with a score of 31-23. I think maybe the offenses are able to move the ball a little bit better than we expect. I'm looking for Penn State to come out of the gate and actually throw the ball a lot early and often. I think one of the things, if you're playing on the road in a fairly hostile road environment with the roster that we have, the strength, we've talked about the running game. We want to get it going. We want to get Singleton the ball. But the strength is your passing game. The strength is the receivers that you have and the tight end room that you have versus what we think is a fairly suspect Auburn secondary. So I think the goal should be for Penn State to come out, use your strength, be aggressive early, try to get an early lead. The last thing you want to have happen is, and I think the Purdue game was a good indication of what happens if you come out and play not to lose and you just run on first down, run on second down, pass on third down, and punt over and over and over again. I think you need to come out and take some shots early, see if you can get that early lead, make Auburn feel like they got to chase. If we kind of stagnate on offense early, allow them to get a lead going, and then they lean on that running game. And then if you're Penn State, you're feeling like you're chasing. That's the last thing you want. So I'm actually looking for, despite what we've been talking about the running game, I would like to see us be really aggressive, get a lead, and then come back to that running game late.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that we can just, get out ahead and then take care of business and just, run the clock out and show that, the big bad SEC stadiums aren't that big of a factor. So that's what I'm hoping. Devin, what do you got?
Yeah, so Zach, I think you hit a lot of points there that I totally agree with. I think it's really crucial for us to take a lead early because Auburn is a team that is built to play from ahead. I don't think that they're really built to play from behind. So we should be willing this game, even though I want us to run the ball every chance we get, should be willing to take shots and take our chances downfield because I think it gives us the best chance to win. That being said, I don't think Auburn is that good, if I'm just being completely honest from what I've seen. Not that I think Penn State is that good, but I really don't think Auburn's that good. So I'm going to go my final score, probably the widest margin of all the three of us. I'm going to go Penn State 27. Yes, 27 because we miss an extra point again. 27-10. 27-10. And we cruise.
Whoa.
Yeah, blowout. Cruise to it.
Wild. I was not expecting you to say that, in all honesty.
I know because I was talking all day about how we were going to lose. So
yeah, and you've just been like nonstop in the Auburn, Alabama web pages.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been on Alabama.com for like the last 12 hours. So honestly, maybe that's what swung my opinion. Tom Green, shout out Tom Green. If you ever watch this, it's all because of your article that I chose.
Let us know. We'll bring you on the podcast.
Yeah,
you can do the post game with us.
Absolutely.
I'll tag you on Instagram. I'm hoping he has an Instagram. I don't know.
Yeah, I really think it's all about the start. I think Devin's score is very possible, especially if Penn State gets out ahead and you force TJ Finley to chase. I mean, he hit the nail on the head. They only have like 10 catches through 2 games by all of their wide receivers combined. Once you take the tight end and running backs out of it, do they have the ability to make chunk plays through the air if they get behind by a touchdown, 10 points, 14 points? It remains to be seen. And again, with this secondary, you think if you get them into that position, all of a sudden they start chasing, you start to see interceptions, turnovers. I mean, yeah, it's for me, it's hard to predict too big of a victory just because road games are tough,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
You got SEC talent down there, and I don't think they're great. I think, the quarterback in the passing game is a problem, but and regardless of how bad they looked against Mercer or San Jose State, and I think they didn't look that great. I think you're right. There's a chance. And some of the Auburn stuff I was reading, some of their own fans are predicting they're going to finish 7th in the SEC West, which is admittedly easy to do in a pretty tough division. But, they haven't looked good, but Penn State's going to get their best shot, right? It's easy to kind of sleepwalk through. It's easy to sleepwalk through a game against Mercer and a game against San Jose State. Losing to Penn State last year, that sting for the returning players, they're going to show up and they're going to be hyped up. That's why, again, I go back to I think the first quarter is really important.
Yeah, and I'll be right with you, Zach. I would say San Jose State's probably better than Ohio. I don't know by like what I would put a spread on that, but I would say San Jose State's probably a little better than Ohio. But Penn State looked really confident against Ohio. And I didn't think Auburn looked confident against San Jose State, especially when they fell behind early. Sure, they found a way to win it at the end, but they fell behind and it was a little bit of a struggle. And they really had to rely on Bigsby to find and Hunter to find a way to win. So totally agree.
Yeah. So I was just, I wanted to pronounce Auburn's head coach correctly. It's Harris. I don't know how to say it.
Harsin.
Brian Harsin.
Yep.
So here's a Jordo cold hot take. He's going to be the second Power 5 coach fired after this weekend.
Not going to happen.
I mean, he was 6-7 last year.
I mean, he almost got fired in the offseason after 1 year, which tells you everything you need to know about SEC schools. But I don't think they're going to fire him after week 3. But he is on the hot seat for sure.
I don't know. After 2 lackluster games, almost losing to San Jose State this last weekend.
I should have lost to Georgia Southern last year. So,
yeah. Was it Georgia Southern or Georgia State?
Georgia State. You're right. I'm sorry.
It was Georgia State. And in that same season, they absolutely gave away a game against Alabama that they should have won.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of college. Maybe to sum this all up, that's the beauty of college football. a team that can lose to Georgia State, and in that same season they had Alabama on the ropes and just gave a game away.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
College football at its finest.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it with Penn State. They've almost lost to
lose to Illinois, and then the next week go to Columbus and play Ohio State really tough.
Yeah. I mean, even the year we beat Ohio State, we lost to Pitt, who was terrible that year.
And
so.
I mean, when we played Michigan in week 4 in 2016, we didn't even look like a Division I team. I mean, we had like our 8th string linebackers out there, and Michigan's just running it down our throat.
Yeah. It's crazy. But that's why we love it. So I think that's going to wrap it up. You guys have anything else you guys want to talk about?
Nope.
No, that's it for this week's edition. Make sure to check us out on our Instagram, Twitter, as well as here on YouTube. We're going to sign off. We'll see you for the post game. Let's hope we get another win against an SEC school and continue to see us maybe go 15-0 this year and win a national title. That's all I got. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast.
Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.